Hello guys, back again together with me here. In this video, I will tell a storyline of a movie released in 2020, The Secret Garden. The movie, which was adapted from a book of the same title, told a story about a little girl who found a secret garden in her uncle's place. Curious about how she found the garden and brought the magic for her cousin? Let's continue the complete storyline. But before we start, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe and hit the bell button to get notified on our new video. This film begins with the background of India in 1947. At that time, India and Pakistan were separated. A girl named Mary Lennox was seen playing with puppets in a tent in her room. She played with her dolls all night. The next day, she called the people at his house, but no one was there. Mary, who was alone, only spent her time playing with her dolls. For days, Mary was alone and hungry. She ate the leftovers she found in the house. Not long, suddenly a man came who then took Mary to the children's shelter. Later we knew that Mary's parents died due to a cholera breakout. Accustomed to living a luxurious life, Mary refused to eat and instead gave it to someone else. Not long after, Mary was then taken aboard a ship to sail. On the way, Mary threw her doll into the sea knowing that she was no longer a child. It turned out that Mary was going to be sent home to her uncle who lived in England. When she arrived in her home country, Mary was accompanied by a woman named Mrs. Medlock to his uncle's house. On the way, Mary saw a bird that greeted her happily. Finally, they arrived at the uncle's big but very quiet residence. Mary was immediately brought into the room and Mrs. Medlock advised Mary to stay in the room and not explore the house. After that, Mary was staying in his room, feeling cold and lonely. She remembered the past when she lived with her family in India. From her memories, it can be seen that Mary's family, especially her mother, did not care about her. In the middle of the night, Mary was awakened by a sound. Mary walked to the corner and asked if anyone was there. But there was no one there. The next day, Mary peeked through the window and saw Mrs. Medlock was walking with his uncle. Mary was surprised when a woman named Martha entered her room. Martha was the woman assigned to take care of Mary. When she saw her, Mary protested that she had been feeling cold last night and heard some strange voices. Martha ignored her and told Mary to eat. Mary refused to eat and forced Martha to dress her. At first Martha refused because she was annoyed, but she was forced to obey Mary's wishes. After getting dressed, Mary went out of the room and she saw her uncle and Mrs. Medlock were arguing in a room. They were talking about his uncle's furniture in the house. Then, Mary went out of the house and played by herself using the jump rope. She was walking around the house that looked unkempt until she saw someone in the distance. Mary ran to catch up to the person, but when she arrived, it turned out that the person was no longer there. After playing, Mary rested and ate the sandwiches she brought. Out of nowhere, a dog suddenly came to accompany Mary. Mary looked scared and tried to chase the dog away. Until Mary walked home, the dog was still following her. When she got home, Mary had protested to Mrs. Medlock about the stray dogs following her. Mrs. Medlock didn't care and instead told Mary about the other rules of the house. Mary went back to the room, and when she looked at the walls of her room, Mary thought back to the times when she lived in India. Not long after, Mary fell asleep. The next morning, when Mary woke up, she saw Martha cleaning the fireplace. He asked about the sound that she heard every night. Mary thought the voices were ghosts. Martha told Mary to ignore the voice. Then, after getting dressed, Mary went to the kitchen and asked the waitress there for sandwiches. Mary intended to call the dog she met yesterday with the piece of meat that was in the sandwich. Later, Mary managed to feed the dog and the both of them became close friends. They happily played together until one day the dog ran and brought Martha to a wall. Mary thought the wall was the dog's house. That night, Mary returned to her room and in the middle of the night, she woke up again hearing the same sound. He ventured into the house and Mary was surprised when she found a boy lying in bed. They both introduced themselves. The boy named Colin and he was the son of Mary's uncle, which means they were cousins. Mary was curious because Colin's face was pale, and when she opened Colin's blanket, she suddenly saw an image of her father from the past. The next day, Mary had woken up in her room and Martha was already there. Mrs. Medlock came and scolded Martha for something, but Mary defended her. After getting dressed, Mary met her uncle in a room. The uncle was happy with Mary's arrival, but he warned Mary not to make a mess in the house if she didn't want to be sent to the dormitory. After talking to her uncle, Mary went back to see the dog and the two of them played together. They were running outside until suddenly the dog was caught in a trap and injured. Mary helped him and after escaping the trap, the dog led Mary to the wall she had previously seen. The wall was quite high and Mary was trying to climb it. After reaching the outer side of the wall, Mary saw a very beautiful garden. Later, Mary and the dog explored the park. In the garden, Mary also met the bird that she had previously seen. The bird led Mary to a place where a key was kept. Mary took the key. At night, Mary has returned home to clean up. She walked back down the house and visited Colin's room. Mary wanted to take Colin, who was a hunchback, for a walk, but Colin refused. Insisted, Mary forced Colin to sit in a wheelchair and she took Colin to her room. Inside the room, it turns out that there was a secret room door where a photo of Colin's mother and Mary's mother is stored. There were also clothes and accessories belonging to Colin's mother. Instead of being happy, Colin was annoyed and finally both of them fought until Colin fell to the floor. While lying on the floor, Mary discovered the fact that Colin's back was actually not as bent as he had thought. The next day, Mary was playing with the dog again and she met another boy named Dickon. They played in the beautiful garden beside the wall happily all day until they found a gate in the garden. Mary and Dickon tried to open the gate with the key which Mary found before. Then, both of them sneaked into the house and planned to go into Colin's room. They had met with Martha, who warned not to cause trouble. Mary and Dickon insisted on rushing into Colin's room to take him to the garden. They forced Colin to sit in a wheelchair even though Colin refused. Secretly, they brought Colin to the park. Colin, who was a spoiled child and never played outside, was scared when Mary pushed his wheelchair so fast. Finally, they reached the garden and when they entered the gate, they were greeted with beautiful yellow flowers. They went back to playing in the garden and Mary introduced the dog to Colin. Colin also named the dog Hector. After a few days, Mary planned to visit the park again. Mrs. Medlock, who saw it, followed where Mary went. Realizing that she was being followed, Mary tried to hide in a tree. However, due to carelessness, Mary fell and she was caught. After that, Mary was brought by Mrs. Medlock to the house. Arriving there, Mary's uncle got so furious with her because Mary took the pearl necklace from the secret room. Mary's uncle scolded her until suddenly he found out that the room that he had been hiding for so long had been discovered. Knowing this, Mary's uncle decided to send Mary to the dormitory. But before that, he locked Mary in her room. Mary was so angry and she vented her frustration on a wooden horse in her room. How surprised Mary was when she found many letters inside the wooden horse. That night, Mary read the letters and the next day, Mary immediately ran to the secret garden. Dickon, who saw it, immediately followed Mary. Both of them discovered an unexplored part of the secret garden, including the tree where Mary's mother and Colin's mother often met. Mary also said that Colin's mother had suffered from an illness and before she died she asked Mary's mother to accompany her. After the death of Colin's mother, Mary's uncle, who was getting devastated, finally closed the park. Mary also had the idea to bring Colin to the park. They both managed to take Colin and threw him into a small river. They played all day in the garden and got to know different kinds of flowers and birds. After playing, Mary took Colin to his mother's memory tree. She thought that if he knew the tree, Colin would be happy. However, it turns out that Colin didn't like it and asked Dickon to take him home. Surprisingly, when they were walking home, the trees withered along. That evening, Mary reread the letters she had found and how surprised she was when she saw her mother at the window. Mary immediately went to Colin's room. She was shocked to see Colin, who was trying to walk even though he finally fell. The next day, they went back to the garden and read the letter together. From these letters, Mary knows the fact that her mother really cares for her even though she looks indifferent. After they back into the house, Mrs. Medlock took Mary to a room where there was already a dorm uniform and Mary's belongings. She will be sent to the dormitory soon. Knowing this, Mary immediately ran to her uncle and asked why his uncle had told Colin that he was hunched over the time. Mary tried to convince her uncle that Colin could recover and walk again, but it didn't work out. That night, Mary ran and hid in the garden because she didn't want to go to the dormitory. The next day, Colin and Dickon followed Mary and played in the garden. It wasn't long before they saw some smoke coming from their house. It turns out that Mary's uncle's house was on fire and he was looking for Colin inside. Mary burst into the burning house and tried to save the uncle who was already inhaling a lot of smoke. Uncle Mary then fell to the floor and he asked Mary to leave him. Mary did not want to leave her uncle, and at that moment the uncle saw the reflection of his wife. Same thing happened to Mary, she saw the reflection of her mother gently caressing her cheek. They both managed to get out of the burning house safely. After that, Mary took her uncle and Mrs. Medlock to the secret garden where Colin was there. Uncle was surprised when he saw Colin trying to walk, and he hugged him. In the end of the movie, Mary's uncle reopened the garden and he renovated his burning house. Colin, who was once paralyzed, was now able to walk, and as usual, he was playing happily in the garden with Mary, Dickon and the dog. Okay, the Secret Garden movie storyline is over. I hope you enjoy the video and don't forget to like, subscribe and share with your friends. Please wait for the next video and bye from now.